My parents canceled my 18th birthday for my sister's tantrum, so I quietly moved out and watched their perfect life fall apart without me. It should have been my moment. My 18th birthday, the day I was finally supposed to feel like I was seen. I had planned everything for months. A small celebration in the backyard, just my family. The decorations were ready, the cookies were cooling on the table, and I had even arranged the lights. It was supposed to be special, not extravagant, but meaningful, just enough to make me feel like I mattered, at least for one night. But as I stood there, looking out over the decorations, the warm Arizona breeze teasing the streamers, I realized something. This wasn't my night. I had just been told by my mother, in the most casual way, that my birthday was canceled. My sister Miranda, she explained, was upset. She couldn't go on her trip, so everything else had to be put on hold. It wasn't even a question. It was just fact. My birthday didn't matter because Miranda's feelings were more important. I stared at my mother, not knowing what to say. Her voice was flat, like she was telling me they'd rescheduled a dentist appointment, not canceling the one day I had waited years for. I don't think she even noticed the emptiness in my eyes as I processed what she'd just said. I could barely keep the tears from welling up, but I didn't cry. Instead, I stood there in the backyard, silently blowing out the candles that should have been lit. The cookies sat untouched. The night felt still, like time had stopped, but it didn't matter. My parents never seemed to notice how much I sacrificed just to be in their shadows. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just let it sink in. The quiet shift inside me was sharp, final. It wasn't surrender, though they would think it was. It was the beginning of everything that would unravel after that moment. I've always been the good one. The quiet one who didn't ask for attention, the one who would quietly step aside whenever there was a choice to be made. Growing up with Miranda meant learning how to be invisible. She was 5 years older, louder, and according to my mother, more sensitive. Sensitive. That was the word that explained everything. She couldn't handle the smallest inconvenience without the world shifting around her. When she didn't like the color of her room, the whole house rearranged itself. When she refused to eat what everyone else was having, we all adapted to whatever she wanted. And when she slammed doors, the walls rattled with the force of it. Everyone catered to her needs, even when it made no sense to. I learned to be quiet, to fade into the background, to let her take up all the space because she needed it. I was the one who got her hand, me, downs, the smaller room, the quieter attention. I told myself that was fine. That was just how things worked. Families had imbalances, right? And if I just waited long enough, if I stayed patient, eventually things might balance out. But this was different. I had been patient for years, and now, on my 18th birthday, I realized the truth. It would never change. My family would always revolve around Miranda. They would always let her have whatever she wanted, even if it meant sacrificing my happiness. It was too much. And this time, I couldn't let it go. The silence in the backyard deepened. I checked my phone again, hoping, praying there was some kind of mistake. Maybe they were running late. Maybe there had been a miscommunication. But no. There were no messages, no calls. It was just me, the decorations, and the faint buzzing of the lights above me. At 9 o'clock, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked inside, hoping to find some sign that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't real. But my parents were curled up on the couch, watching TV like everything was normal. They didn't even look surprised when I walked in. Just mildly annoyed, like I had interrupted their evening. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant for it to be. "We canceled the party, Illa." You know how delicate Miranda is right now. I stared at them, waiting for some punchline, waiting for the joke to land. But it didn't come. This wasn't a joke. This was my life, my 18 years of quietly sacrificing everything for everyone else, suddenly becoming very real. "You canceled my 18th birthday because Miranda is upset." My dad didn't look up from the remote. His voice was flat. "She's been crying for 2 days. You know how hard this week has been for her." I wanted to laugh, or maybe scream, but instead, I just stood there, staring at them. My own parents, choosing my sister's tantrum over my milestone birthday. I didn't know what hurt more, the words or the way they said them. They didn't even see the betrayal. They couldn't. They were too wrapped up in making sure Miranda was okay to notice the person standing right in front of them. Then, like a ghost, Miranda appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a satin robe. Her hair perfectly brushed, despite the supposed emotional meltdown she had been having. She leaned against the railing, looking down at us as though she was doing us a favor by gracing us with her presence. "What's with the yelling?" she asked, voice dripping with boredom. "You're stressing me out." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, but it was sharp. "You canceled my birthday for her tantrum," I said, pointing at her. Miranda blinked slowly, then smirked. "If I can't have fun today, neither should you. It's just basic empathy." Empathy. The word hit me like a slap. I had spent my whole life being told to empathize with her moods, with her needs, with her crises. But she'd never once been asked to empathize with mine. And right there, in that moment, I realized I was done. "I'm done," I whispered, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. The room went still. The air felt thick, like the tension was pressing down on me. No one spoke. And I didn't need them to. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't need to ask for permission. The shift had already happened. And there was no going back. I didn't expect my family to change, not like that. It wasn't even a question anymore whether my birthday mattered. They'd decided it didn't. And I stood there in the quiet, feeling like the air around me had thickened, heavy and suffocating. Miranda never had to ask for attention. It was given to her without question, always. It was the way things had always been. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, of course they did, in their own way, but their love for me always felt conditional. My role had always been to fill the empty space when it was convenient for them, to make them look good, to quietly stand in the background while the world catered to Miranda's needs. I turned away from the room, not wanting to see their faces anymore. My hands trembled as I pushed the sliding door open and stepped into the cool Arizona night. The lights in the backyard were still buzzing softly, their glow muted against the deepening sky. I could feel the empty space around me, the decorations that I had carefully placed hours ago, still hanging there, untouched. The cookies on the table would probably stay there too, forgotten, just like everything else in my life that I had worked so hard for. It felt like something inside me had broken, but I wasn't sure if I was sad or just numb. I was tired of being invisible, of always being the one to step aside. I had spent years convincing myself it didn't matter. I told myself that everyone had their own struggles, that maybe someday things would shift. I kept waiting for the day when my time would come, when my family would see me for who I was, not just as the background character to Miranda's drama. But this was different. I wasn't going to wait anymore. I wasn't going to stay in the wings while Miranda got everything she wanted. My 18th birthday should have been mine. It was the day I was supposed to step into the world as someone important, someone who mattered. Instead, it was just another day where my existence felt like an afterthought. The cool breeze swirled around me, and I realized I was holding my breath. I don't know how long I stood there, my mind running in circles, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. But there was no sense to be made. I was used to Miranda being the center of attention. I had accepted it in my quiet way. But this was too much. I had never asked for much. I didn't want lavish gifts or extravagant parties. All I wanted was for once to be seen, to be acknowledged, to have my moment. And now it was gone, canceled, just like that. When I finally walked back inside, the house felt even colder, even quieter. My parents didn't even look up when I came in. They were still glued to the television, too absorbed in whatever mindless show they were watching to notice the hollow look in my eyes. They didn't even seem to realize the weight of what they had just done. They didn't see how much it had hurt. "Where is everyone?" I asked again, though I already knew the answer. "We canceled the party, Illa," my mom said, still not looking at me. "You know how delicate Miranda is right now." I stared at her, the words sinking in slowly, as if I needed time to understand just how little I mattered to them. She didn't even sound sorry. She sounded tired, like this was just another thing to handle, like I was just another problem to be fixed. Daniel didn't look up from the remote. She's been crying for 2 days, you know how hard this week's been for her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I was turning 18, that this was supposed to be my time. But I didn't. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, my face burning with the sting of what they had just said. My sister, at 23, was still the fragile one, still the one everyone tiptoed around. But what about me? What about the daughter who had quietly taken a back seat for years, never asking for anything? The door opened and Miranda walked in, her robe trailing behind her like she was stepping into some grand performance. She acted like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't the reason everything had fallen apart. She leaned against the staircase railing, looking down at me with that bored, detached expression she always wore when she thought the world was supposed to bend around her. "What's with the yelling?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the TV. "You're stressing me out." I don't know what snapped in me then. Maybe it was the way she casually ignored the destruction she'd caused, or the way my parents just let her get away with everything. Maybe it was all the years of holding my tongue, of being the quiet one. But whatever it was, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You canceled my birthday for her tantrum," I said, pointing at Miranda, my voice quiet but clear. Miranda blinked, her eyes widening just a fraction. Then she smirked. "If I can't have fun today, neither should you. It's just basic empathy." Empathy, the word, hit me like a slap. All these years, I had been the one to empathize with her. I had learned to accept her moods, her needs, her constant crises. But not once had anyone ever asked me to be seen. Not once had they asked if I was okay, if I needed something. I had been the one to give to make space for everyone else, while they treated my feelings like they didn't exist. "I'm done," I whispered. I didn't scream. I didn't shout, but I was done. And for the first time in my life, I knew I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The silence in the room stretched long, heavy, thick with the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. My family, oblivious as ever, didn't understand what was happening. But I did, and that was enough. I spent the next few days in a haze, caught somewhere between shock and numbness. I should have expected it. Deep down, I always knew my place in this family, always knew where I ranked. I had convinced myself, time and time again, that it was fine, that it didn't bother me, but it did. And now, standing at the edge of everything I had put up with for years, I couldn't pretend it didn't matter anymore. The days dragged on in the same rhythm, my parents continuing their usual routines, oblivious to the weight of their actions. They didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge the hurt they had caused. They went about their business, as if I was just an inconvenience that would eventually fade away. Every time I passed them, I could feel the space between us growing, widening. The air in the house felt heavier, thicker. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The thought of being trapped there, surrounded by their indifference, made my skin crawl. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good daughter, trying to be the one who made things easier. And for what? So they could cancel my birthday because of a tantrum. No, that wasn't me anymore. I wasn't going to fade into the background again. One evening, when my parents were glued to the TV, I grabbed my bag and started packing. There was a strange calmness to it. The weight of my decision didn't feel as heavy as I thought it would. As I folded my clothes, I realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of leaving them behind, of walking away from the house I had spent so many years in. It was like a weight was slowly lifting off me, piece by piece. Every shirt I folded, every book I tucked into my bag, felt like I was reclaiming something I didn't even know I had lost. My room had always felt temporary, like a place I was just passing through. It wasn't a space where I felt at home. It wasn't mine, not really. It was just a room that I slept in, a room that belonged to the family's perfect image, but never to me. I glanced around at the walls. the decorations that had never been mine to choose, and something inside me cracked wide open. I had spent so many years convincing myself that it didn't matter, but it did. It mattered more than I had ever allowed myself to admit. When I finished packing, I took one last look around the room I had been forced to call my own for so long. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The decision had already been made. I was done. Done being invisible. Done being the second choice. Done being the one who had to disappear so others could shine. I walked downstairs, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silent house. My parents were still on the couch, still watching TV, like nothing had happened. The room was just as it always was, quiet, detached, the kind of silence that had become suffocating. My mom looked up when I entered, her face blank, as though she hadn't even noticed I had been avoiding them for days. "Isla," she asked, her voice flat, unrecognizing. "What's going on?" "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. "I'm going to stay with Grandpa." Her face didn't change. "But why? This is ridiculous. You're just upset. We'll make it up to you." I shook my head. I couldn't even look at her anymore. "No, you won't. Not this time." My dad didn't say anything. He didn't even look up from the TV. He didn't have to. I had already made up my mind. There was no point in explaining. No point in trying to get them to understand. They never would. Not until it was too late. Miranda came down the stairs as I was heading for the door, her face still half hidden by the slouch of her robe. She didn't even look surprised. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice tinged with that same bored tone she always used when something didn't directly affect her. "I'm leavin'," I repeated, my voice firmer this time. She gave me that trademark smirk, the one that always made me want to scream. "So dramatic. It's just a birthday." I turned back to her, finally meeting her eyes for the first time in days. "You know what, Miranda? People cancel things all the time, but only in this house does one daughter have to disappear for the other to feel okay." She blinked at me, but I could see the flicker of disbelief in her eyes. She didn't get it. She never did. And in that moment, I realized I didn't care. I wasn't going to make her understand anymore. I wasn't going to explain myself to anyone who didn't want to listen. Edward had been waiting by the door, standing as steady and composed as ever. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't tell me to calm down or try to change my mind. He just waited. And for the first time in my life, someone was letting me make my own decision. No guilt. No explanations, just freedom. "Ready?" he asked, his voice soft but sure. I nodded, not a single doubt in my mind. I wasn't looking back, not anymore. The moment I stepped outside, I felt something inside me shift again. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I was free. When I walked out of the house that night, it felt like I was stepping into a new world. The cool night air wrapped around me, fresh and unfamiliar. I followed Edward to his car, my bag clutched tightly in my hand. The house behind me, the one I'd grown up in, faded as we drove further away. It felt like leaving wasn't just about moving to a different house. It was like I was leaving my past behind, the version of me that had always been invisible. Edward didn't ask me anything. He didn't try to offer advice or comfort. He just let the silence stretch between us, and I realized I didn't need him to say anything. His presence alone was enough. It felt safe, grounded. We didn't have to talk to understand each other. We drove for a while, the streets of our town passing in a blur, and as we made our way out of the city, everything felt lighter. I had spent so many years waiting for someone to tell me I mattered, and now finally someone had. It wasn't a big, dramatic moment. It wasn't loud. It was just quiet. Edward didn't tell me I was doing the right thing. He didn't need to. He just gave me a choice. And that was all I had ever wanted. When we reached his house, I realized how much I had been holding my breath, how long I had been living in a place where nothing ever really felt like mine. But now, standing in front of Edward's house, it felt different. It felt like I was allowed to exist, to breathe without fear of being overlooked or ignored. Edward's house wasn't perfect. It wasn't decorated like some magazine spread or planned down to the smallest detail like the house I had left. but it felt real. It felt like I could be myself without the weight of someone else's expectations hanging over me. I spent the next few days at Edward's house, and I found myself slowly shedding the person I had been. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but every day felt like a small victory. There were no arguments, no guilt, no expectations. There was peace. It was a peace I had never known at home, and I reveled in it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to walk on eggshells. There were no slammed doors, no angry voices, no one else's moods dictating my day. It was just quiet. It was strange at first, but then I started to realize how much noise had been in my life before. How loud the tension had been, how stifling it was to constantly live in the shadow of someone else's demands. Edward didn't talk much. He didn't need to. His presence was steady, solid, like the foundation of a house that had been built to last. I didn't have to explain myself to him, didn't have to make excuses for my decisions. He didn't judge, didn't question. It was like I could finally breathe without worrying if I was doing it wrong. I spent my time focusing on school, on my future. It was a strange feeling, this focus on me for the first time. I was used to being the one who held everything together, used to being the one who made sure everyone else was okay. But now I didn't have to fix anything for anyone. For the first time, I didn't have to be the one who carried the weight. But even in this new, peaceful space, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that my family wasn't finished with me yet. I had left, but they hadn't given up. The texts started coming. At first, it was my mom. Her messages were filled with guilt, pleading for me to come back. "We didn't mean to hurt you, Ela. Please come home. We just want to fix things." And then there was my dad, sending a few messages, each one sounding more desperate than the last. "Come back. Let's talk. We'll make things right." And of course, there was Miranda. Her message came last. "You're ruining the whole family over a party. Grow up, Ela." I didn't respond to any of them. At first, I thought about it. I thought maybe I could explain myself, tell them how hurt I was, how long I had been holding everything inside. But then I realized something. I didn't owe them an explanation anymore. I didn't need to make them understand. This wasn't about them. It was about me. Edward didn't ask me what I was going to do. He didn't push me to respond. He just let me sit with it. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had the choice. I didn't have to go back. I didn't have to fix anything for them. That was the hardest part, the letting go. I had spent so long trying to fix everything, trying to make my family see me, that I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to let go of the weight of their expectations, but with every unanswered text, with every moment of silence, I felt myself getting stronger. I knew I couldn't go back to that house. I couldn't go back to being the quiet, invisible daughter, the one who was always there, always waiting for someone to finally notice her. That wasn't who I was anymore. When the silence stretched on, I found myself thinking about the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was the first time in my life I could imagine what came next, without fear, without worry that someone else would take it away from me. And for once, I wasn't afraid of what that future looked like. I wasn't afraid of stepping out on my own. As I sat with Edward one evening, his calm presence beside me, I realized that leaving wasn't just about running away from my family. It was about choosing something better for myself. I wasn't running from them, I was running toward me. And that felt like the first step toward finally becoming who I was always meant to be. The days after I left were strange, almost unreal. I had expected to feel some sort of emptiness or regret, but instead, there was this growing sense of peace I couldn't quite explain. Edward's house was quiet in a way that made the silence comfortable. There was no yelling, no tension, that always seemed to hover in the background at my parents' place. For the first time, I felt like I could exist without being weighed down by someone else's needs, without always having to fight for space in a house that never seemed to have room for me. Still, there were moments of doubt. As much as I didn't want to admit it, there was a part of me that missed them. It wasn't the chaos, or the way they had always put Miranda first. It wasn't the way my mom barely noticed when I was upset. But it was the familiarity of it all, the way the house smelled after dinner, the sound of my dad's voice when he was watching TV. I had spent so many years pretending everything was fine, and now that I was free of it, I didn't know how to feel about the space I had created for myself. It was like I was learning how to live again in a world where I didn't have to shrink to fit in. The texts kept coming. At first, it was my mom, full of guilt and regret. "Isla, we didn't mean to hurt you," she wrote. "Please come home. We want to fix this. Just come back and we'll make it right." She was always the one who tried to smooth things over, but I wasn't sure what she thought was broken. Maybe it was just the image of the family they had worked so hard to maintain. Maybe it was the idea of me leaving that made everything feel like it was falling apart. Then my dad texted, "Let's talk. We'll work this out, I promise. Just come home, please." His messages were filled with that familiar desperation, but I couldn't let myself believe that things could really change. Not when they had never really seen me before. Not when I had spent 18 years waiting for someone to notice that I was just as important as Miranda. Miranda's text was the last to come through. "You're ruining the whole family over a party, Isla," she wrote. "Grow up. This isn't how things work." She had always been good at turning everything into a reflection of how it affected her. Even now, she couldn't understand that this wasn't just about a birthday party. It was about years of feeling like I didn't matter. It was about me finally saying that I was done being ignored. But Miranda didn't get that. She never did. I didn't respond to any of them. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable, like there was something I was supposed to be doing. But then I realized that I didn't need to fix anything for them. I didn't owe them an explanation or an apology. I had already given them so much of myself, and they never even noticed. This time, it was my turn to choose. Edward didn't ask about the messages. He didn't question why I wasn't responding. He just let me be, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. He made me breakfast the next morning: eggs, toast, a bowl of fruit. It was simple, but it was exactly what I needed. No pressure, no expectations, just a quiet morning, a moment of normalcy in a world that had always felt off balance. I spent the next few days settling into the rhythm of life with Edward. There was no stress, no constant walking on eggshells. No one demanding anything from me. It was a relief I didn't even realize I needed. As the days went by, I started to focus more on my future. Edward helped me look at colleges, and for the first time, I was excited about the idea of going somewhere new. Somewhere I wasn't defined by my family's expectations. It was a strange feeling to think about a future that was completely my own. It felt like freedom, but also like I had just started to scratch the surface of what I could be. Then, one evening, the phone rang. I knew it was my parents before I even saw the caller ID. I stared at the screen for a long moment before finally answering. "Ela?" My mom's voice came through, thin and tense. "We miss you. We want you to come home. Please just come back. We'll fix everything. We can have the family we used to have." Her words didn't surprise me. They never did. They were always the same, repeating like a script they had memorized. They wanted everything to go back to how it was, to the version of me that would always be second to Miranda's needs. But I wasn't that person anymore. I couldn't be. "I'm not coming back," I said, my voice steady, calm. "Not unless Miranda moves out." There was a pause on the other end of the line, the silence heavy with the weight of the words I had just said. I could hear my mom's breathing, slow and shaky, like she was trying to find the right thing to say. "Please don't be like this," she said, almost pleading. "You're tearing the family apart." "No," I replied. "I'm not. I'm just asking for something I've never had, something I've always needed." There was another long pause. I didn't expect her to understand, but it didn't matter. I wasn't asking for permission. I was setting my own boundaries now. "We'll talk about it," she said quietly before hanging up. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel anything, really. Just empty. Empty in a way that wasn't bad, but more like I was finally letting go of something I had been holding on to for far too long. Edward didn't ask about the call. He didn't need to. He just kept going about his day, letting me process it in my own way. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't have to make anyone else's choices for them. I had made mine. I was living my life the way I wanted, without the weight of everyone else's expectations holding me down. And that felt better than anything I had ever done. The days after I sent that message were strange, almost surreal. I had expected a lot of things: guilt trips, pleas to come back, maybe even a dramatic confrontation. But it was the silence that followed that left me feeling both unsettled and oddly at peace. My parents didn't respond right away. They never did. I waited, though I tried not to care. They would eventually reach out, wouldn't they? They would have to. But nothing. I felt a quiet sense of victory in that silence. I had never been able to just exist without their demands. It was always about them, about keeping the peace at all costs. And now, for the first time, there was nothing but me, no expectations, no guilt, no fixing everyone else's problems. I could breathe. In those first few weeks with Edward, I began to settle into a life that didn't require me to constantly shrink. I spent my days taking classes online and sorting through scholarship applications, slowly letting the weight of my past lift. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had room to think, to plan, to be. It was strange in a good way, like I had never known what it felt like to be free, but now I did. I spent long evenings with Edward, sitting on the back porch and talking about everything and nothing. There was no judgment, no criticism. We talked about my future, about college, and what I wanted for myself. I had never really thought about it before, not truly. My life had always been a background to my family's story. I was the quiet one, the one who just kept everything moving, kept everything together, without ever asking for much. But now, I started to realize how much I had put on hold for them, for their idea of what I was supposed to be. It wasn't just the family dynamics that had shifted, I had shifted too. I was no longer the girl who had to make herself small. I could be big. I could be important. I could matter without feeling like I was taking up someone else's space. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. I had been expecting it for days, but when I saw the name on the screen, I almost didn't want to answer. It was from my mom. She had sent a few texts before, but I had ignored them. Now, though, there was something different about this one. It wasn't just the usual plea. It felt more urgent, more desperate. Please, we need to talk. It's been hard without you. You're not just tearing the family apart, you're tearing us apart. Please come home. Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I had been preparing for this moment, but when it came, I wasn't sure what to feel. I felt a pang of something, maybe guilt, or maybe just the weight of the years I had spent trying to make them happy, but it was quickly overshadowed by something else. Something stronger. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I typed my response. I'm not coming back, Mom. Not unless Miranda moves out. This isn't just about a birthday. This is about everything. I hit send before I could change my mind. There was no immediate response. I didn't know if I expected one. Part of me thought they would ignore me again, like they always did when I made demands. But another part of me held out hope that maybe this time they would understand. The next morning, I woke up to a new message. This time, it was from my dad. Isla, we just want you back. We don't understand what's happening. Please come home, and we'll fix it. We'll do whatever it takes. I stared at the message, my heart heavy with the weight of their words. I had always wanted this. I had always wanted them to see me, to see the things I had sacrificed for them. And now, finally, they were offering to make things right. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because it was always just about fixing things on their terms. It was about their version of a perfect family, not about who I was or what I needed. I didn't reply to my dad. I didn't need to. The silence in my heart had grown louder than any words they could say. Edward made breakfast for me that morning. Eggs, toast, fruit. Simple, but comforting. He didn't ask about the messages. He didn't need to. It was like he knew I didn't want to talk about it. We sat in silence. The kitchen quiet except for the sound of silverware clinking against plates. For the first time, it felt right. There was no pressure, no expectation to answer the phone or reply to messages. I didn't owe anyone anything. It felt like I was finally starting to understand what real peace felt like. It wasn't the absence of noise, but the absence of expectation, the absence of having to apologize for my needs, the absence of feeling like I didn't belong. I spent the next few days letting it all sink in. I didn't call my parents. I didn't check my phone every 5 minutes. I didn't let their words hold power over me anymore. For the first time, I had control over my life. I wasn't living for them, for their expectations or their image. I was living for me. The silence stretched on. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to go back to the family I had always tried so hard to please. I was building something new, something that was mine. And that was enough. There was a sense of finality in that decision, but there was also a quiet excitement. For the first time in years, I could see a future that didn't revolve around what my family thought of me. A future that was just for me. The silence stretched on for what felt like weeks, though in reality, it had only been a few days. My parents had stopped trying to contact me, and at first, I thought it was just their way of trying to let things cool down. But as the days turned into a week, and the messages from my mom stopped altogether, I began to realize something. This wasn't just their silence, it was my decision finally setting in. I had made my choice, and they were beginning to see it. They were seeing the consequences of what it meant to choose Miranda over me for so long. I wasn't sure what I had expected. Maybe I thought they would come rushing back, begging me to come home, but that never happened. Instead, I received a message from Miranda. It wasn't what I thought it would be. It wasn't an apology or even an attempt to understand. It was more like a cold reality check, a reminder that things would never really change. Her message was simple. You're ruining the whole family over a birthday party, Ela. Grow up. It felt so small, the way she put it, so trivial. But even then, I could see the cracks in her message. The way she was trying to twist everything to make it about me being the problem. She was still holding on to the belief that everything revolved around her, that everything I did, everything I chose, was just a tantrum on my part. And I realized then, in the coldness of her words, that nothing would ever change for her. She would always be the center of attention, always the one who got to dictate the family's story. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I wasn't going to engage with her anymore, not in the way I had. I wasn't going to beg for something she would never give. The next day, I went to the store to pick up some things for breakfast. I hadn't really been focusing on anything other than getting through each day, but as I walked through the aisles, something caught my eye. It was a shelf full of birthday decorations, the kind I had wanted for my own celebration. It seemed strange, standing there, surrounded by all the colors and streamers that should have been a part of my birthday. Yet I felt no bitterness. Not anymore. I smiled to myself as I picked up a small cake topper that read, "Make a wish." I hadn't made a wish that day, not when I blew out the candles. But standing in that store, I realized something simple, yet profound. I hadn't needed anyone else to make my wishes come true. I had to make them happen myself. When I returned to Edward's house, I placed the little cake topper on the kitchen counter. Edward didn't ask why I had bought it. He just smiled, as if he understood the quiet shift that had taken place inside me, and in that moment I felt something click into place. I was done waiting for permission. I was done waiting for someone else to give me the space to be who I was. My family had never given me that space. They had never truly seen me. But I had begun to see myself. I had begun to realize that my happiness didn't depend on their approval. The next few days passed in a quiet kind of routine. I spent my time working on applications for college, and though I felt a certain weight lifting off my shoulders, there were still moments when the tension crept in, the anxiety of waiting for more messages from my parents, the worry that maybe, just maybe, they might not ever understand. But then, another text came through. This time, it wasn't from Miranda. It wasn't even from my mom. It was from my dad. "We need to talk," it said. "We've been talking, and we realize things got out of hand. We're sorry." We want you back. Please, come home. The words were almost too perfect, like they had been rehearsed. I could hear the desperation in them, the need for things to be right again. But I also heard something else. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. They still didn't get it. They still didn't understand why I left. It wasn't just the birthday. It wasn't just about one moment. It was about a lifetime of being overlooked, a lifetime of watching my sister take everything and leave me with nothing but the scraps. It was about a pattern that had stretched on for so long, and I was done. I had spent years trying to get their approval, trying to be the good daughter, trying to be the one they could always rely on, but they never saw me. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I didn't know what to say, so I simply typed back, "Miranda needs to move out if you want me back." I didn't think about it. I didn't hesitate. That was the boundary. I had drawn it in the sand, and I wasn't going to take it back. I hit send and waited. The reply came in a few minutes. "We'll talk about it," my dad said, "but this is not the way to handle things. We want our family back together." It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Edward didn't ask what I was going to do. He didn't need to. He knew what I was going through, even without me saying it. He simply offered me a warm cup of tea, and we sat together in the kitchen, the quiet settling around us like a comforting blanket. I didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of standing on my own. I wasn't afraid of setting boundaries. I wasn't afraid of living my life without worrying about who would approve or disapprove. I was learning to be okay with myself, just as I was. And that was the greatest gift I had ever given myself. The weeks that followed were quieter than I could have ever imagined. The silence from my parents was almost too much to bear at times. But in those moments, when the loneliness crept in, I reminded myself that it was the silence I had chosen. And that made all the difference. I wasn't waiting for someone else to fix things anymore. I wasn't holding my breath, hoping they would suddenly get it. I had already made my peace, and now I was learning to live without their constant influence. I settled into my life with Edward, a routine that felt more real than anything I had ever experienced. The mornings were slow and steady, coffee brewing, soft footsteps on the tile floor, the low hum of the newspaper as Edward read through the headlines. The afternoons were filled with my classes, applying for scholarships, and long walks around the neighborhood. There was no rush, no overwhelming pressure to be someone else. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was trying to fill a role in a story that wasn't mine. I was just living. I had started seeing Caleb more often. He walked me home from school every day, never asking too many questions, just checking in, making sure I was okay. I had never known what it felt like to have someone who didn't expect anything from me, someone who didn't see me as an accessory to their own life. He never tried to fix me. He just let me be. It was during one of those walks, with the late afternoon sun dipping low in the sky, that I received the call I had been waiting for. I knew it was coming, but I still wasn't prepared for how it would feel when it finally came. It was from my mom. "Ela, we've been talking," she said, her voice shaky, like she didn't quite know what she was asking. "We want you to come back. We've thought it through, and we can't keep doing this. Please come home." Her words hit me, but not in the way I expected. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened. It was just a desperate plea for everything to go back to normal, as if time could simply rewind. But I knew better. Nothing could go back to how it was. Not for me, not for them. "I'm not coming back, Mom," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You can't fix this by asking me to come home. Things don't work that way anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her searching for the right words, but I didn't need her to find them. I had already found my truth. "I'm sorry, but I need to do this for me. I need space. I need to figure out who I am outside of all of this," I said, my voice quieter now. "Please? Ela," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "You're breaking us. We don't know what to do without you." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of her words, but I didn't feel guilt. Not anymore. Because I knew that what I was doing wasn't about breaking anyone. It was about building myself back up, piece by piece. And for the first time, I felt no hesitation. I'm not breaking anything, Mom. I'm finally starting to build something real, for myself. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. The finality of it felt heavy, but also liberating. It was like cutting the last thread that had been holding me in place, the last tie to a past that had never allowed me to grow. Over the next few days, I continued to live in the quiet space I had created for myself. I focused on my studies, on the future I was slowly building, and on letting go of everything that had been holding me back. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But every day, I felt a little lighter, a little more like myself. Then, one morning, while I was working on an application, Edward came into the kitchen. He handed me a letter, one that had come in the mail that morning. It was from the college I had applied to. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, unsure of what I was about to read. But when I saw the words, "Congratulations," everything else seemed to fade away. It wasn't just an acceptance letter. It was proof that everything I had been working toward was coming to fruition. I had done this. I had gotten myself here, without anyone else's help. I showed Edward the letter, and he smiled, his pride in me evident in his eyes. "I'm proud of you, Isla," he said. "You've earned this." I felt a lump form in my throat. I hadn't realized how much I had needed to hear those words. To hear someone say that I was worthy of this success. That I hadn't just been the one who kept everything together for everyone else. I had built something of my own. I packed up my things the next day. The process of preparing to leave Edward's house bittersweet. I knew it was time to move on, to take the next step in my life. But I also knew that the time I spent with him had given me something I would carry with me forever, a sense of peace, of independence, of finally knowing my worth. As I loaded up my car with the things I would need for college, I took one last look at the house. It wasn't my home, not in the way that the house I had grown up in was. But it had been a place of healing, a place where I could finally be myself. And for that, I was grateful. When I left Edward's house, it wasn't with sadness. It was with hope. Hope for the future, hope for what I would make of my life. For the first time, I wasn't defined by my family's dysfunction. I was defined by who I was becoming, and no one could take that away from me. As I drove toward my new life, I thought about how far I had come, how much I had learned. I didn't need to destroy anyone's life to find my own peace. All I had to do was walk away, and in the end, that was the most powerful decision I could make. I was free,